Imagine you're standing in your kitchen, just a totally normal Tuesday evening.
Right, nothing out of the ordinary.
Exactly. And suddenly someone you love just, they collapse.
Oh, man.
Yeah. They hit the floor, completely unresponsive. So in an absolute panic, you grab your phone and you dial 911.
As anyone would.
Right. Your hands are shaking, you're, struggling to speak clearly, and you're just trying to describe what's happening to the dispatcher on the other end of the line.
Which is incredibly hard to do under that kind of stress.
It really is. But here is the scenario I really want you, the listener, to envision today. Before that human dispatcher even fully processes your panicked words, a machine that's quietly listening in the background of that phone call has already diagnosed a cardiac arrest.
It's wild to even think about.
It is, because it didn't just listen to your words. It analyzed the frantic rhythm of your breathing, the specific acoustic gasp coming from the floor, and like the ambient noise in your kitchen.
Yeah, and it formulated a diagnosis and silently flashed an alert right on the dispatcher's screen.
Which honestly sounds like an excerpt from a science fiction novel.
It really does. But the reality is, this level of instantaneous algorithmic diagnosis is actively happening right now. We are witnessing a fundamental reconstruction of the very first point of contact in healthcare.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're taking you on a journey to the absolute razor-sharp cutting edge of out-of-hospital emergency care.
We're going to track the entire chaotic lifespan of a medical emergency.
Right. From the literal sound waves of that 911 call to the algorithms predicting where the ambulance should even drive.
Down to the incredibly advanced motorized tools the paramedics are actually using when they finally step into your living room.
To do this, we're unpacking a truly remarkable stack of sources today that look at this whole ecosystem from, every conceivable angle.
We've got a lot of ground to cover. We have a comprehensive, peer-reviewed clinical breakdown of artificial intelligence in pre-hospital care.
Yeah, and we're looking at a massive, globally focused market report detailing the multi-billion-dollar external defibrillator industry.
Plus, a fresh press release detailing how EMS software systems are quietly integrating with one another.
And honestly, perhaps most revealing of all, we're diving into an actual unredacted FDA clearance document for a brand new AI heart screening algorithm.
It's a wild, complex intersection of clinical science, operational logistics, and raw commercial market forces.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning, because every single medical emergency, no matter how it ends, it starts with that dispatch call.
Absolutely. The first point of contact.
Right. Before a paramedic ever grabs a jump bag or turns on a siren, there's this incredibly high-stakes, volatile conversation where every single second is just fighting against biology.
And I've always wondered how human beings manage that.
Same. The people handling these calls, the emergency medical dispatchers, they're operating under a cognitive load that frankly seems impossible to sustain.
Well, the cognitive burden is staggering when you break down the actual mechanics of the job. Think about the sensory input. The dispatcher is tethered to a headset. They are receiving a panicked, often fragmented narrative from a caller who's likely experiencing the worst moment of their entire life.
Yeah, there might be screaming in the background.
Exactly. Screaming, profound language barriers, or the caller might just be completely disoriented.
Right.
And through all of that overwhelming auditory chaos, the human dispatcher has to impose rigid clinical order.
Because they can't just, say, okay, sending help. They have to categorize the crisis.
Precisely. They have to follow highly structured questioning protocols to identify life-threatening pathologies.
So they're clicking through complex drop-down menus on their screen.
Yes, checking specific compliance boxes and attempting to verbally guide a panicked bystander through life-saving interventions like CPR.
All while simultaneously coordinating the physical dispatch of a multi-ton vehicle across a crowded city.
Right, which leaves very little mental bandwidth for subtle medical diagnosis.
I can imagine. If someone is screaming that their chest hurts, you send the truck. But if the symptoms are vague, it gets murky.
It becomes incredibly murky. Human beings, no matter how well trained, have a finite processing speed limit.
Yeah.
They can only hold so many variables in their working memory at one time.
And that bottleneck is exactly why the integration of artificial intelligence into this primary intake phase is such a massive paradigm shift, right?
Exactly. We are moving from a world of purely manual, human-driven triage to automated, real-time diagnostic decision support.
Our clinical sources detail a specific system built for this, called the Cordy AI platform.
Right, the Copenhagen study.
Yeah, and looking at the architecture of how this thing actually works, it essentially operates as a dual model system.
Right. The first component relies on automatic speech recognition, or ASR.
And the second component is natural language understanding, or NLU. But I have to ask, if I am panicked and screaming into a phone with terrible cellular reception, how does a computer transcribe that accurately?
Well, that's the beauty of the dual model architecture. The ASR layer is not functioning like the basic dictation software on your smartphone.
Oh, it's not?
No, it is an acoustic model trained specifically on the chaotic frequencies of emergency environments.
Okay.
It's transcribing the incoming speech in real time, yes, but it's simultaneously performing active semantic filtering. It's separating the signal from the noise.
Right.
And what's fascinating here is that it's actually analyzing the noise itself as diagnostic data.
Wait, the noise itself, like the background sound?
Yes. It is actively listening for the subtle acoustic signatures of caller distress.
Give me an example.
For example, it's trained to recognize agonal breathing.
What exactly is that?
Agonal breathing is a specific involuntary brainstem reflex that often occurs during cardiac arrest.
Okay.
To a panicked bystander, and sometimes even to a human dispatcher, it just sounds like the patient is gasping or still breathing.
So they might say, oh, he's breathing.
Exactly. But it's not effective breathing at all. It's a sign of impending death.
Oh, wow.
The AI's acoustic model identifies the precise auditory frequency and rhythm of that gasp, isolating it from the background static and the caller's voice.
So it's not just cataloging what the caller is saying. It's extracting medical data from how they are saying it and from the physiological sounds happening in the background.
Exactly.
That is incredible.
And that acoustic data is then instantly converted into semantic properties and fed into the second component, the natural language understanding model.
So the NLU.
Right.
Yeah.
This is where the actual clinical prediction happens. The NLU acts as a predictive classifier.
Meaning it's comparing the call to past calls.
Yes, it takes the text and the acoustic flags and constantly evaluates that live conversation against massive historical training corpora and vast libraries of medical literature.
So it's essentially taking the chaotic puzzle pieces of your 911 call and cross-referencing them against millions of past emergencies at lightning speed.
Exactly. It extracts the geographic address, it cross-references the described symptoms with established diagnostic criteria.
And then what? Does it talk to the caller?
No, crucially, it delivers prompt, real-time visual alerts directly to the dispatcher's console. It doesn't take over the call.
Oh, gotcha.
It pops up a silent notification with a statistical probability. It tells the dispatcher, based on the ambient noise and the caller's phrasing, there's an 85% probability this patient is in cardiac arrest.
It provides an objective, mathematical safety net inside a highly subjective, emotionally charged environment.
Precisely.
And the real-world data validating this is staggering. The clinical review looked at a massive deployment of Cordy AI at the Copenhagen Emergency Medical Services.
Right. They specifically analyze out-of-hospital cardiac arrest detection.
Yeah, and before the AI was introduced, the human dispatchers had a sensitivity rate of 72.5%.
So they were catching roughly 3/4 of the actual cardiac arrests over the phone.
Right. But with the AI running silently in the background, that sensitivity jumped to 84.1%.
That's a huge leap, and the time metrics are perhaps even more vital.
Yeah, let's talk about the time.
The AI reduced the median time to recognition by 10 full seconds. They went from diagnosing the arrest in 54 seconds down to 44 seconds.
See, I feel like 10 seconds sounds completely negligible if you're, like, waiting in line at a grocery store.
Sure.
But in the context of human biology, what does 10 seconds actually buy you?
Well, when your heart ceases to pump oxygenated blood to your brain, 10 seconds is a biological eternity.
Wow.
The decay curve of human tissue is relentless. Every single minute that passes without chest compressions and fibrillation decreases the patient's chance of survival by roughly 7 to 10%.
Wow, every single minute.
Yeah. So when you save 10 seconds on the initial dispatch side, it means the dispatcher can initiate bystander CPR 10 seconds earlier.
Which limits brain damage.
Directly. It limits ischemic damage to the brain. It preserves millions of neurons. Shaving 10 seconds off the intake process directly translates to a patient who can walk out of the hospital rather than requiring long-term neurological care.
The sources also cite a retrospective registry study from Sweden that really reinforces this.
The 851 verified cases.
Yeah, they looked at 851 verified cases of cardiac arrest. The highly trained human dispatchers recognized 25% of those cardiac arrests within the very first minute of the call.
And the AI.
The Cordy AI recognized 36% of them in that exact same first minute. It is just fundamentally faster at processing the data.
And if we connect this to the broader landscape of emergency medicine, the implications extend far beyond cardiac arrest.
Right. It's not just for heart stopping.
No, the technology is applicable to any time-critical pathology where human tissue is actively dying. The clinical data modeled around pre-hospital stroke detection perfectly illustrates this.
Right. The stroke data was fascinating because it highlighted a very specific human flaw.
It did. With acute ischemic strokes where a clot blocks a vessel and the brain neurologists have a stark saying, time is brain.
Time is brain.
Right. Every single minute of delayed treatment equates to an estimated 1.8 days of healthy life loss.
We measure this in disability-adjusted life years, right?
Yes. Rapid detection is the only way to minimize that loss. In the Copenhagen data, human dispatchers had a baseline stroke recognition sensitivity of 66.2%.
But the clinical review noted that the human performance wasn't consistent. The dispatchers exhibited measurable biases.
Exactly. They were statistically less likely to correctly identify a stroke if the emergency call came in on a weekend, or if the patient experiencing the stroke was female.
Why is that? That seems crazy.
Well, that is a crucial point about human factors in medicine. Human beings are susceptible to systemic cognitive biases and profound mental fatigue.
Okay, so if you're tired.
Right. If you are a dispatcher at the end of a chaotic 12-hour shift on a Sunday night, your cognitive acuity is naturally diminished.
Sure.
You might unconsciously dismiss vague symptoms in a female patient because they don't align with the classic textbook presentation of a stroke you were trained on.
I see.
The algorithm, however, does not get tired. It does not experience cognitive fatigue, and it does not care if it is a Sunday night or a Tuesday morning.
It's just doing the math.
Exactly. The statistical modeling in the clinical review projected that applying this ASR framework to stroke calls could increase the detection rate enough to translate into a 5% increase in the delivery of thrombolysis.
Thrombolysis is the clot-busting drug.
Yes, the intravenous clot-busting medication given at the hospital.
Right.
An increase within the optimal time-to-treatment window.
So by eliminating human inconsistency at the dispatch level, you actively counteract systemic healthcare disparity.
You level the playing field, yes.
But I want to inject some realism here, because bringing this technology out of a controlled Danish laboratory and into the messy real world isn't as simple as downloading an app.
No, not at all.
There's a massive localization challenge. The sources mentioned the National Health Service in Wales.
Ah, the NHS pilot.
Yeah, they piloted this Cordy AI system. But the problem was the AI had been trained extensively on Danish and standard American voices.
Right.
So when they activated it in Wales, it completely stumbled.
Which exposes a profound technical hurdle in machine learning. An algorithm is fundamentally bounded by its training data.
Yeah.
The natural language understanding model looks for semantic patterns. If a caller in Cardiff describes their chest pain using a highly localized slang term or a specific regional idiom.
And a thick accent.
Exactly. And the AI has only ever ingested standard American medical terminology, the predictive classifier fails. The entire dual model architecture breaks down because the foundational data doesn't map to the local reality.
So they can't just buy the software off the shelf. They have to essentially send the AI to local language school.
Pretty much.
The NHS had to conduct this massive supplementary training process, feeding the algorithm thousands of historical regional emergency calls, just so it could learn the nuances of Welsh accents and local phrasing.
It requires a bespoke, localized tuning process for every new geographic region it enters. You cannot deploy a monolithic medical AI globally and expect uniform performance.
Right.
The acoustic model must understand the local accent, and the semantic model must understand the local culture.
And beyond the language barrier, there's the sheer issue of volume. What happens when the dispatch system is just physically overwhelmed?
Surge capacity.
Yeah. The clinical review outlines a scenario in Portugal that I think anyone living in a major city can relate to.
The sudden spikes.
Yeah, they experience these massive sudden surges in emergency calls. Imagine a catastrophic multi-car pileup on a major highway.
Right.
50 different people all witness the exact same crash, and all 50 people dial 911 at the exact same second.
Which happens more often than people think.
And the system gets flooded, causing queue delays of 5 to 6 minutes just to get a human dispatcher on the phone.
A 5-minute queue delay in emergency medicine is not just an inconvenience, it is a systemic failure.
Yeah, because if one of those callers is reporting a cardiac arrest, That 5-minute hold time is a death sentence.
It absolutely is.
So to combat this, Portugal started piloting a drastically different approach. They used ChatGPT-based conversational agents.
Generative AI.
Yeah, to perform initial triage during these massive volume spikes. When the queue backs up, the AI answers the phone.
Which is a fascinating pivot. They aren't using the AI as a highly tuned diagnostic oracle like Cordy. They're using large language models as a robust, tireless sorting mechanism.
The generative AI conducts a rapid conversational initial assessment.
Right.
But how does an LLM know who is actually dying and who's just annoyed about the traffic jam?
Well, in academic evaluations, modern large language models like GPT-4 or Claude 3.5 Sonnet have demonstrated remarkable capabilities in parsing transcribed text.
Okay.
And they can classify patient criticality according to standardized clinical frameworks.
Like what kind of framework?
They use the ABCDE sequence.
Which stands for?
Airway, breathing, circulation, disability, exposure.
Oh. Yeah.
The generative AI listens to the caller, runs that sequence, and automatically escalates the high acuity patients to the human dispatchers immediately.
While safely filtering out the redundant calls reporting the traffic jam.
Exactly. It acts as an algorithmic shield, protecting the limited human resources from volume collapse.
Okay, let's step back and look at the timeline. The AI has listened to the call, it's filtered out the noise, it's instantly diagnosed the hidden stroke or the cardiac arrest, and the human dispatcher has initiated the response.
Right. The intake phase is complete.
Now we transition into the physical reality of the situation. How do we actually get the multi-ton ambulance to the patient?
We're moving from predicting the medical diagnosis to predicting the physical location of the emergency.
And honestly, reading this section of the sources felt like reading a blueprint for a Minority Report-style pre-crime division, but for ambulances.
It really represents a massive operational leap forward.
Yeah.
To understand why this is so revolutionary, you have to understand how ambulances have been deployed for the last few decades.
Standard model.
Right, which is called System Status Management, or SSM.
Which, from what I understand, is basically just relying on static historical averages. An agency looks at their data and says, well, historically, we get a lot of car crashes at this specific downtown intersection on Friday nights. Therefore, we will park an ambulance at a gas station near that intersection every Friday night.
Precisely. It is entirely static. You are essentially looking in the rearview mirror to navigate the road ahead.
Right.
And the fundamental flaw with static historical averages is that they are completely blind to dynamic, real-world variables.
Like what kind of variables?
A sudden, unexpected rainstorm during rush hour.
Oh, sure.
A massive traffic bottleneck caused by spontaneous construction, or a large sporting event letting out 30 minutes earlier than expected.
Yeah, life is messy.
The real world is a fluid, chaotic system. Deploying emergency resources based on static historical spreadsheets leads to vast geographic inefficiencies and critically delayed response times.
And this is where spatiotemporal machine learning enters the chat.
This is the transition from historical guessing to real-time, multivariate forecasting.
I want to break down how this actually works because the technical mechanics are mind-blowing. They are. When they set up this system, progressive EMS agencies are completely abandoning system status management. They don't just take a map of a city and draw an arbitrary grid of identical squares over it.
No, because an arbitrary grid ignores the socioeconomic and architectural reality of a city.
Right.
A 1 square mile grid placed over a dense, high-rise financial district has a vastly different emergency risk profile than a 1 square mile grid placed over a quiet suburban cul-de-sac.
So the sources describe how they use advanced spatial clustering algorithms, specifically something called k-means clustering.
Yes, K-means.
They algorithmically divide the city into organic zones based on actual historical coal densities and physical geography. They let the math define the borders of the neighborhood.
They are preserving the true spatial logic of the environment.
And once they've established these organically defined zones, they feed an astronomical volume of data into predictive algorithms.
Right. The literature frequently cites models utilizing XGBoost.
Okay, let's unpack XGBoost, because the name alone sounds intense. What makes extreme gradient boosting different from a standard computer program?
Well, a traditional computer program follows a linear set of rules. Gradient boosting is a machine learning technique that builds an ensemble of weak prediction models.
Weak models, like what?
Typically decision trees. What makes it powerful is how it learns. It builds a tree to predict an outcome, analyzes where that tree made errors, and then intentionally builds a second tree specifically designed to correct the errors of the first.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it iterates this process rapidly, layering hundreds of trees, constantly refining its own predictive power. It's exceptionally good at finding complex, nonlinear relationships in massive data sets.
And the data set they feed this XGBoost model is wild. It's not just looking at the time of day or the day of the week.
No, it ingests continuous time series data.
It pulls in live meteorological feeds, severe weather alerts, and even ambient air quality indexes in real time.
And this is where we see the transition to true predictive modeling.
Because why does an ambulance algorithm care about air quality?
Right. It cares because a sudden, severe spike in particulate matter or poor air quality will predictably lead to a surge in respiratory distress calls among asthmatic and COPD patients a few hours later.
Oh, wow.
The historical static model cannot see that invisible weather pattern.
It has no idea it's a smoggy day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The spatiotemporal algorithm sees the atmospheric data and proactively predicts the downstream biological emergencies.
It's essentially search pricing logic, like an Uber app.
That is an excellent analogy.
The system sees the rain starting, it sees the traffic slowing down, and it calculates that the demand for rides, or in this case ambulances, is going to spike in that specific neighborhood.
Yes.
So it moves the vehicles there before you even open your phone to ask for one.
And it also factors in simultaneous active incidents.
Like what?
If a massive multi-alarm fire breaks out on the east side of the city, that incident might instantly draw in 6 ambulances and 3 fire engines.
Which leaves the rest of the city empty.
Under the old system, the eastern half of the city is now dangerously exposed, and a dispatcher has to manually try to figure out how to cover it.
Right.
The XGBoost model, however, instantly recognizes the geographic coverage gap created by the fire. It recalculates the risk across the entire city in milliseconds.
And automatically recommends moving specific available ambulances to new staging posts to dynamically cover the exposed territory.
Exactly.
Do we have hard data proving this actually works outside of a computer simulation?
We do. In Barranquilla, Colombia, researchers ran a rigorous comparative case study.
Okay.
They trained an integrated XGBoost model on these multivariate time series to predict emergency demand. The results were clear.
What were the numbers?
The AI model outperformed their traditional baseline forecasting methods by up to 26.9% in areas with sparse historical data.
That's a huge margin.
And overall, across the entire metropolitan system, their predictive accuracy improved by 16.4%.
The example from the sources that truly amazed me took place in Lombardy, Italy.
AREU.
Yeah, the Public Emergency Agency there, AREU, didn't just run an algorithm. They built a literal digital twin of their entire regional EMS infrastructure.
The concept of a digital twin is fascinating. It is a highly complex, dynamic virtual simulation of a physical system.
Right.
Historically, rendering a digital twin of something as complex as a regional healthcare system was computationally prohibitive. It was just too slow.
Because it's too much data.
Yes. But by integrating advanced machine learning techniques, the Lombardy platform can now ingest real-time environmental and operational data and process day-by-day predictive simulations almost instantly.
And the mathematical results were dramatic. They measured their forecasting error using a metric called root mean squared error.
Right.
They reduced that error rate from 8.7 events per hour down to just 2.5 events per hour.
It's an incredible reduction in error.
They're accurately simulating where the emergencies will occur with incredibly high fidelity before the human beings in those neighborhoods even realize they're about to have an emergency.
And when you translate that mathematical accuracy into operational reality, it results in massive commercial and systemic savings.
Which the market reports highlight.
Right. They look at commercial deployment platforms like Marvelize.
That's the Mobile Area Routing and Vehicle Location Information System.
Yes. These systems don't just calculate a daily plan, they recalculate localized coverage requirements every 5 minutes.
So the dispatcher screen is just constantly updating.
It's a living, breathing map, dynamically shifting the ambulances around the city to optimize response times.
And the financial incentives to use this are huge. Sunstar EMS deployed the system, and they documented a verified reduction in their average response times of over 2 full minutes.
2 minutes is an eternity in EMS.
Yeah. By shaving 2 minutes off their drive times, they were hitting their strict, municipally mandated response time goals over 93% of the time.
And that performance has a dollar value.
It does. It meant they avoided $400,000 in contractual compliance penalties. They're saving lives by arriving faster, and they're saving $500,000 just by letting an algorithm tell them which gas station to park at.
Exactly.
But I want to pump the brakes here for a second. It is very easy to read these numbers and assume this is some frictionless technological utopia.
It's never frictionless.
No. The clinical sources also detail a deployment in New Brunswick, Canada, where things went entirely sideways. And the fascinating part is it didn't fail because the math was wrong or the algorithm broke.
It failed because of human beings.
Right.
This is a critical lesson in what we call socio-technical barriers. You can engineer an algorithm that is mathematically flawless and operationally optimal.
Yeah.
But if the human beings tasked with physically executing the work reject the system, the entire deployment collapses.
Exactly. In New Brunswick, they attempted to roll out this highly intelligent decision support system for their paramedics.
Wow.
It used cellular telemetry to bypass the old radio system. The algorithm would analyze the call, determine the absolute closest, most appropriate ambulance, and send a silent, dedicated alert directly to the paramedics' handheld cellular devices.
It was the epitome of efficiency. It routed the exact right unit to the exact right place with zero wasted communication.
But the frontline paramedics vehemently pushed back against it. First, they expressed deep skepticism about cellular coverage reliability, especially out in the rural, wooded areas of the province.
Sure, which is a valid technical concern. But the deeper issue, the true root cause of the friction, was a psychological phenomenon the researchers identified as information isolation.
Okay, let's talk about that. Because under their traditional legacy system, every single dispatch was broadcast loudly over VHF and UHF radio frequencies.
Yes.
Every paramedic sitting in an ambulance anywhere in the province could hear every single call going out.
And while an engineer might look at that radio chatter as inefficient acoustic noise, to the paramedics, it provided vital, passive situational awareness.
Just by listening.
Exactly. By listening to the tone of the dispatcher's voice, by hearing the frantic radio traffic of a crew managing a severe crash 2 towns over, the paramedics subconsciously built a mental map of the entire regional team's positioning and stress levels.
Oh, that makes total sense. They knew when the system was getting hammered.
They felt connected to a shared operational burden.
And the AI system stripped all that context away. It replaced the shared fraternal reality of the radio network with a sterile, silent cell phone ping telling them where to drive.
Right. They felt completely isolated from their colleagues.
They felt like Uber drivers blindly following an app rather than medical professionals operating as a cohesive team.
If we connect this to the broader picture of healthcare innovation, it is a stark reminder of the culture of paramedicine. It is a highly fraternal profession built on trust, shared experience, and mutual awareness.
Yeah.
The transition to a discrete cellular-based AI routing protocol fractured that cultural fabric.
The psychological disruption was so profound that the provincial agency was forced to maintain the traditional loud radio network as an active, parallel backup system.
Solely to maintain the morale and situational awareness of the crews.
It perfectly illustrates that we are not simply optimizing cold machines. We are attempting to weave intelligent machines into deeply complex, highly emotional human ecosystems.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the AI has predicted the location, it navigated the socio-technical friction of the paramedics, and the ambulance has now arrived at the scene.
The boots are on the ground.
The paramedics put the vehicle in park and step out into the street. This is where this deep dive gets incredibly tangible and physical.
Yes.
How is artificial intelligence actively changing the literal hands-on interventions being performed on the patient?
We shift our focus from predictive logistics to procedural augmentation. And the very first step in any physical intervention, particularly on a trauma scene, is triage. When a paramedic walks onto the scene of a major car accident, their immediate priority is risk stratification. They have to accurately match the physiological severity of the patient's hidden injuries with the appropriate hospital destination.
Because all hospitals are not created equal.
Right.
If you take a patient with a massive, uncontrolled internal hemorrhage to a small rural community clinic that doesn't have a surgeon on staff, the patient dies.
Yes.
Conversely, if you take a patient with a simple broken finger to a massive, highly specialized level I trauma center, you are clogging up vital resources that are needed for dying patients.
Correct. The goal is perfectly calibrated resource allocation. But traditional pre-hospital triage protocols rely on rudimentary manual scoring systems and rigid binary physiological cutoffs.
Like what?
A paramedic might look at a protocol that asks, is the patient's systolic blood pressure below 90? Yes or no?
Okay.
But human physiology is rarely that cleanly binary. A young, healthy athlete might compensate and maintain a normal blood pressure despite massive internal bleeding until they suddenly crash.
Ah, I see.
These manual systems frequently result in high rates of under-triage, where a critically injured patient is mistakenly transported to a lower-level facility, fatally delaying definitive surgical care.
Or they result in over-triage, completely overwhelming the specialized trauma centers with minor injuries.
Exactly.
So to solve this, researchers developed an AI model called P-Test. I saw the P-Test model use millions of records, but how does looking at a database of past trauma actually help a paramedic standing in a muddy ditch trying to evaluate a crushed leg?
Well, the P-Test algorithm was trained on over 2 million real-world patient records extracted from the National Trauma Data Bank.
Okay.
It utilizes extreme gradient boosting, similar to the predictive deployment models, but instead of looking at weather and traffic, it integrates complex, continuous clinical streams.
So it's looking at the patient data live.
Yes. It looks at the patient's demographic data, the specific physics and mechanism of the injury, their pre-hospital vital signs over time, and crucially, it factors in the physical interventions the paramedics are actively performing in the field, such as applying a tourniquet or administering pain medication.
So it's not just taking a single snapshot. It's watching the movie of the patient's decline.
Exactly. By mathematically processing all of these continuous variables simultaneously, the algorithm generates a highly accurate probabilistic prediction of clinical deterioration.
It can see the subtle mathematical trends that indicate the patient is going to crash before the human eye can perceive the physical symptoms.
Precisely. And the validation results in the literature are incredibly strong.
What were the numbers?
The P-Test model achieved a sensitivity of nearly 80% for identifying severe trauma, and it reduced the field under-triage rate to an astonishing 8%.
Wow.
That represents a 50% reduction in under-triage compared to traditional manual field triage guidelines.
It's essentially taking the heavy mathematical guesswork out of the most chaotic, adrenaline-fueled moments.
It really is.
But the technology isn't just helping them make intellectual decisions, it's physically guiding their hands. Let's explore AR-CPR, because this feels like a video game applied to human survival.
This is undoubtedly one of the most remarkable physical applications of pre-hospital technology detailed in the literature.
Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, is a brutal, physically exhausting procedure.
It is.
And survival depends entirely on strict adherence to high-performance standards regarding the precise rate and depth of the chest compressions.
Right. And while a career paramedic performs CPR on adults relatively frequently, pediatric CPR, physically compressing the chest of a child, is terrifyingly rare.
And that rarity breeds massive cognitive fatigue, profound anxiety, and operational errors.
Because the mechanics are completely different. A child's chest wall has a vastly different physical compliance and elasticity than an adult's.
That makes sense.
The depth guidelines change based on the child's age and size. In the immense stress of a pediatric arrest, human psychomotor performance degrades rapidly.
Now, historically, modern defibrillators have provided some visual feedback to help with this, right?
Yeah.
Like the Zoll X-Series monitor mentioned in the sources.
Mm-hmm.
I know those use accelerometers inside the sticky CPR pad to measure how deep you are pushing, and it shows you a little dashboard on the monitor screen.
Yes, but consider the ergonomics of that solution.
Okay.
The rescuer has to take their eyes off the dying child's chest, physically turn their head to look at a monitor that might be placed on the floor or obscured by other clinicians,
Right.
visually process the digital data, translate that data into physical action, and then adjust the mechanical force of their arms. It is a disjointed, inefficient cognitive loop.
To fix that broken loop, researchers at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine built an augmented reality head-mounted display, the AR-CPR system.
Right.
What does this hardware actually look like? The source mentions a 6 degrees of freedom inertial measurement unit, but what does that physically mean for the user?
Well, the hardware utilizes an Adafruit microcontroller and sensors mounted on the clinician's wrists and head. A 6 degrees of freedom sensor, or 6DOF, means the hardware is tracking movement in three-dimensional space with extreme precision.
So up, down, left, right.
It tracks movement along the X, Y, and Z axes, moving up, down, left, right, forward, and backward.
Uh-huh.
But it also tracks the rotation, how you tilt, yaw, or roll your wrists.
Oh, wow.
It knows exactly where your hands are in space and exactly how much force they are generating.
And what the system does with that spatial data is mind-bending. It projects dynamic, holographic visual indicators directly into the clinician's line of sight.
Yes.
You are looking straight down at the patient's chest, and superimposed over the physical world, you see a holographic rate gauge flashing, telling you to speed up or slow down to hit the perfect rhythm of 100 to 120 compressions per minute.
Right.
You see a virtual depth bar, visualizing the exact millimeter displacement of the chest wall as you push. You even go to bright visual alerts if you fail to fully take your weight off the chest during the upstroke.
And the simulation study results are extraordinary. They tested the system on trained community emergency department clinicians.
Okay, when these clinicians attempted to perform pediatric CPR purely from memory, without the AR headset, they only achieved the target depth and rate guidelines 18% to 21% of the time.
Wait, 18%? Trained clinicians were failing 8 times out of 10.
It starkly highlights just how difficult and perishable that specific psychomotor skill is without constant daily practice.
But when they strapped on the AR headset, their compliance shot up to 87% to 90%.
Massive improvement.
They went from failing 8 times out of 10 to succeeding 9 times out of 10. And what I found most interesting was the psychological feedback.
Yes, 97% of the participants explicitly stated that the system successfully offloaded their cognitive burden and significantly reduced their anxiety.
They didn't have to desperately try to remember the math. They just had to follow the floating lights.
What's fascinating here is the core concept of cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading.
Yes. By allowing a machine to perfectly calculate and project the complex mechanical requirements of the procedure, the paramedic's brain is liberated.
Their mental bandwidth is freed up to focus on the holistic, systemic management of a crashing patient. They have the mental space to consider the underlying reversible causes of the cardiac arrest, calculate complex medication dosages, or prepare for advanced airway management.
Because the AI is flawlessly handling the physics of the chest compressions.
Exactly.
If offloading the math of CPR saves mental bandwidth, what happens when we try to offload the actual physical dexterity of the hardest procedure in the ambulance?
Airway management.
Yeah. If the AR headset is cool, the divoscope is pure, unfiltered science fiction.
Endotracheal intubation, the process of placing a plastic breathing tube directly through a patient's vocal cords and into their trachea, is arguably the highest risk, most technically demanding, and most stressful procedure performed in the pre-hospital environment.
If the paramedic fails to secure that airway, the patient suffers profound hypoxemia, irreversible brain damage, cardiac arrest, and death.
It's life or death, literally.
And even with modern video laryngoscopes, where the paramedic uses a specialized metal blade with a tiny camera on the end to look around the tongue and see the vocal cords on a screen, the first attempt success rates in the field have frustratingly plateaued around 85%.
Yes.
Why is it still so hard, even when you can see where you're going?
Because it requires an incredibly complex, unnatural bimanual coordination.
Bimanual meaning both hands doing different things.
Right. The paramedic is holding a heavy metal or plastic blade in their non-dominant left hand, using significant physical force to lift the jaw and the tongue out of the way, while simultaneously trying to keep the tiny camera steady.
Okay.
Meanwhile, their dominant right hand is trying to thread a floppy, curved plastic tube down the back of the throat. And because they are looking at a flat, two-dimensional screen, they have zero depth perception. It is an ergonomic nightmare.
The divoscope, which is a prototype AI-guided motorized video laryngoscope, completely deconstructs that nightmare.
It does.
When I read the mechanical breakdown of this device, the only analogy that made sense was a fighter jet targeting system.
It's very similar.
Let's look at how it is physically built. It has a reusable handle that contains a miniature electric motor.
Huh?
You attach a disposable plastic blade to this handle.
Right.
Inside the handle, a passive gear interface connects the motor to these tiny, overmolded drive wheels that sit inside a protected guide channel running down the side of the blade. The actual breathing tube is preloaded into this channel, resting physically against those motorized wheels.
The physical engineering is elegant, but the optical component is where the true breakthrough lies. The live video feed is powered by a YOLO-5 convolutional neural network.
YOLO stands for You Only Look Once, right? It's a real-time object detection algorithm.
Yes. It processes the live chaotic video stream from the back of the throat, which is often obscured by blood, secretions, or vomitus, and it automatically identifies, isolates, and highlights the glottic opening and the vocal cords on the screen.
So it finds a target.
It mathematically maps the anatomical landmarks and draws a bright targeting box completely around the hole you need to pass the tube through.
And this changes the physical mechanics of the procedure entirely.
Completely.
The operator no longer has to blindly manipulate the floppy tube with their right hand. You simply use your left hand to adjust the angle of the camera until a fixed crosshair on the center of the screen aligns with the AI-generated targeting box over the vocal cords.
Like a video game.
Once you have a visual lock, you press a thumb joystick located on the handle, and the miniature motor automatically drives the endotracheal tube forward, threading it perfectly through the vocal cords at a controlled speed.
It's incredible.
You literally just line up the crosshairs and hit the joystick. And the most incredible part, your right hand is totally, completely free the entire time.
Yes.
You can use your right hand to push externally on the patient's neck to improve the camera view, or you can hold a suction catheter to constantly clear blood out of the airway. You are taking a notoriously difficult two-handed procedure and executing it with one hand.
The data from their preclinical validation trial, which utilized embalmed cadavers, is astounding.
What were the results?
Operators achieved a 100% first attempt success rate.
100%.
They successfully placed the tube on the first try every single time, with 0 instances of soft tissue trauma to the airway.
Yeah, unheard of.
Furthermore, they measured the operators using the NASA Task Load Index.
What is that?
It's a rigorous, standardized tool used to evaluate operator workload, frustration, and cognitive stress. The scores were exceptionally low. The cognitive demands of performing this procedure with the divoscope were placed below the 25th percentile of established medical procedure norms.
Wow.
It takes a terrifying, life-or-death procedure and renders it mechanically simple and stress-free.
Okay, we have secured the airway using a motorized joystick, and we have optimized breathing and chest compressions with augmented reality holograms. Now, we need to dive deep into circulation. Yes. How do we detect a heart attack that the traditional machines in the ambulance completely miss? Because this statistic absolutely blew my mind. The machines we currently rely on to diagnose heart attacks in the field are routinely dangerously wrong.
We're discussing the 12-lead electrocardiogram, or ECG.
Right.
In the context of acute coronary syndrome, a heart attack, the primary systemic goal is minimizing the time from the patient's first medical contact with paramedics to the activation of the catheterization lab at the hospital.
Where a surgeon can physically unblock the artery.
Exactly. We refer to this metric as door-to-balloon time. To trigger that massive hospital activation from the field, paramedics rely on the ECG to show a specific electrical pattern called ST segment elevation. They are looking for a STEMI.
But the sources state that 25% to 30% of actual angiographically proven coronary vessel occlusions, meaning there is a verified physical blood clot completely blocking an artery in the heart, do not meet the formal STEMI criteria on the ECG paper.
Yeah.
A quarter of the people having a massive life-threatening heart attack have an ECG that essentially tells the paramedic, everything looks fine to me. How is that physically possible?
Well, it is a limitation of the diagnostic criteria, not necessarily the machine itself.
Okay.
The traditional algorithms in human training focus heavily on measuring the amplitude of the ST segment, but the electrical manifestations of ischemia, a lack of oxygen to the heart muscle, are incredibly subtle and complex.
So they don't always show up as that classic big spike.
Right. When the standard criteria fail to identify these subtle changes, it results in dangerously delayed reperfusion therapy. The patient sits in the emergency room waiting for blood tests instead of going straight to surgery.
Which is terrifying.
Conversely, you also face the problem of false positives.
Right. Conditions that look like a heart attack on the paper but aren't.
Exactly. Conditions like benign early repolarization or left ventricular hypertrophy change the shape of the electrical wave in a way that perfectly mimics a STEMI.
So the machine lies both ways.
Yes. This causes well-intentioned paramedics to activate a highly expensive specialized surgical team in the middle of the night for a patient who does not actually require emergency surgery.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Enter PM Cardio and their Queen of Hearts AI model.
Yes.
This is clinically validated software as a medical device. It doesn't just look for ST elevation. It abandons the simple amplitude measurements altogether.
The Queen of Hearts utilizes a convolutional neural network that evaluates the full complex morphologic architecture of the entire 12-lead ECG waveform.
What exactly is it seeing that human eyes miss? The source mentions De Winter patterns.
Yeah.
What does the De Winter pattern look like, and why does it trick humans?
A Dewar pattern is a specific rare electrical signature indicative of a severe occlusion in the left anterior descending artery, often called the widowmaker.
Oh.
To a human clinician scanning an ECG rapidly, a De Winter pattern often presents as a depression of the ST segment followed by a tall, peaked T wave.
Okay, so it goes down instead of up.
Because the ST segment is depressed rather than elevated, it does not meet the strict STEMI criteria for cath lab activation. A human might interpret it as mere strain or non-acute ischemia, but the AI recognizes that specific subtle morphology as a critical total blockage.
And the reason it knows that is because of how it was trained. It wasn't trained on ECGs where human cardiologists wrote down their opinions.
Right.
It was trained on millions of ECGs where the absolute ground truth was established by actual angiography. It learned what a heart attack looks like by looking at the physical evidence of the blocked pipes in the surgical suite, not by mimicking human interpretation.
And the clinical validation of this approach is undeniable.
Let's hear the numbers.
Across a massive study of 40,000 patients, the Queen of Hearts achieved a twofold increase in the detection of acute occlusions on the very first ECG tracing.
Wow, double the detection.
While simultaneously dropping false positive activations by 81%. In specific registry evaluations, the AI correctly identified 100% of acute occlusions on the first ECG, whereas standard clinical criteria only caught 40%.
Oh, wait, 100%. In medicine, nothing is 100%. What is the AI sacrificing to achieve that number? Are we just sending everyone to the cath lab?
That is an excellent point of skepticism. In any diagnostic test, there is a trade-off between sensitivity catching all the true positives and specificity avoiding false positives.
Right.
Achieving 100% sensitivity usually means your specificity drops, leading to over-triage. However, the 81% drop in false positives indicates the neural network is remarkably specific. It is achieving high sensitivity without flooding the surgical suites with false alarms.
Oh, reassuring.
Furthermore, to ensure clinicians actually trust these bold predictions, PM Cardio integrated a visual explainability tool called ECG Explain.
What does that do?
It projects high-resolution heat maps directly over the digital waveforms, showing the human doctor exactly which microsegments of the electrical activity drove the AI's conclusion. It doesn't just spit out a black box answer, it shows its mathematical work.
But the Queen of Hearts is still an investigational device in the U.S., actively undergoing clinical trials. Let's pivot to a technology that has completely crossed the regulatory finish line.
Okay.
The sources provided an actual FDA 510K clearance document for an AI algorithm cleared in September 2023. It's the Animana Low Ejection Fraction AI ECG algorithm.
This is a remarkable piece of regulatory and clinical documentation. The software is designed specifically to screen for a left ventricular ejection fraction, or LVEF, of less than or equal to 40%.
Unpack that terminology for us. What exactly is LVEF, and why is the 40% threshold so critical?
Ejection fraction is a physical measurement of the percentage of blood leaving your heart's left ventricle each time it contracts.
Okay.
A healthy normal ejection fraction is typically between 50% and 70%. When that number drops to 40% or below, it indicates a profound structural and mechanical failure.
So the heart is basically just failing to squeeze properly.
The heart muscle is weakened and is failing to pump efficiently. It is a major, dangerous red flag for heart failure. Identifying it early is absolutely critical for initiating life-saving pharmaceutical therapies.
But usually, how do they diagnose that?
Diagnosing a low ejection fraction typically requires an echocardiogram, an ultrasound image of the heart, which requires expensive, specialized equipment and a highly trained sonographer.
It's not something you can easily do in the back of a bouncing ambulance.
No, definitely not.
But this Animana AI can detect that physical structural pumping failure just by analyzing 10 seconds of electrical data from a standard, cheap 12-lead ECG.
Yes.
It operates as a portable software container that can be integrated directly into third-party tablets or mobile apps used by paramedics. The paramedic snaps a routine 10-second ECG, and within moments, the software spits out a probabilistic output identifying silent, hidden heart failure.
Which is incredible for preventative medicine.
This means if you call 911 because you feel dizzy or weak, the paramedic might accidentally discover you have severe heart failure just by running a routine field test.
And the clinical validation data required by the FDA to clear this device for market is incredibly robust. The developers conducted a massive retrospective study analyzing 16,000 patient records across 4 different health systems in the United States.
Wow, 16,000.
They took a patient's recent, clinically verified echocardiogram and paired it with their most recent standard ECG.
And out of roughly 14,000 usable match samples, they identified 1,096 cases of true LVEF under 40%. And the AI algorithm found them using only the electrical data with an 84.5% sensitivity and an 83.6% specificity.
Very strong numbers.
But honestly, the part of this FDA document that fascinated me the most was the subgroup analysis.
Yes, breaking down the data reveals that the performance of the algorithm was not perfectly uniform across all human demographics.
It actually shifted significantly based on the patient's age and their body mass index. For instance, the AI's diagnostic performance was actually the lowest in underweight participants, and it was highest in overweight and obese participants.
Which seems counterintuitive.
It does.
Yeah.
That seems entirely counterintuitive. Why would having more body fat make a heart algorithm more accurate?
It comes down to the fundamental physics of electrocardiography. Adipose tissue body fat acts as a biological electrical insulator.
Oh, interesting.
It actively changes the voltage amplitude and the morphology of the electrical signals as they travel from the heart muscle through the chest wall to the electrodes on the skin.
So it muffles the signal.
Yes, the algorithm, having been trained on a massive, diverse data set, has likely learned to identify and seamlessly adjust for the specific voltage attenuation patterns caused by obesity.
That's crazy.
It may even be finding unique, hidden electrical signatures within those attenuated, muffled signals that correlate very strongly with a low ejection fraction.
And what about the underweight patients?
Conversely, in very underweight individuals, the close physical proximity of the heart to the chest wall might create volatile voltage spikes or baseline wander that the algorithm finds noisier or harder to parse accurately.
The age demographic data was equally wild. The algorithm demonstrated the highest diagnostic odds ratio in patients aged 40 to 69.
Right.
But in younger patients, the algorithm shifted. It had lower sensitivity, meaning it missed more cases, but higher specificity, meaning fewer false alarms. And in elderly patients, the metrics completely flipped. It had higher sensitivity, but lower specificity, meaning it threw more false alarms.
This demographic variance raises a vital point about how we deploy these tools in clinical practice.
How so?
This is precisely why the FDA explicitly states in the indications for use that the Anumana algorithm is not intended to be a standalone diagnostic device and should be applied jointly with clinician judgment.
So it doesn't replace the doctor?
No. An AI is a powerful, mathematically rigorous safety net, but it is entirely dependent on the context of the physical world. It requires a human clinician who understands these demographic nuances, who can look at the patient and recognize that their age or BMI might be skewing the AI's confidence to interpret the output correctly.
The algorithm is a diagnostic aid, not an autonomous doctor replacement.
Exactly.
Okay, we have diagnosed the hidden heart failure, we have navigated the airway, we have treated the patient, but none of this happens in a vacuum.
Right, there's a whole ecosystem around this.
A paramedic can't just do all this incredible work and drive away. How is all of this incredibly complex data documented? And zooming out even further, who is driving the multi-billion-dollar commercial market that is actually funding and manufacturing these advanced machines for ambulances and public spaces? We need to look at the ecosystem and the raw business of saving lives.
The documentation piece is the invisible backbone of the entire system. Pre-hospital care has historically suffered deeply from what we call the retro-charting problem.
Retro-charting, what is that?
Paramedics perform a cascade of complex life-saving interventions in the highly chaotic, poorly lit environment of a moving ambulance. And then, an hour later, sitting exhausted in a hospital bay, they have to try to accurately remember the exact minute they pushed a specific dose of epinephrine or the exact depth of their chest compressions.
Which introduces massive systemic human error.
It does.
But the press release, we're analyzing details, a new deep integration between First Do, a major EPCR software company, and OneDose, a clinical treatment platform.
EPCR stands for Electronic Patient Care Report.
Right.
This software integration means that all the structured clinical data captured during the call, the exact medication dosing calculated by the app, the precise timestamps of every intervention, the protocol adherence guided by the AI flows automatically and instantly into the patient's official electronic record.
Which completely eliminates duplicate manual data entry.
It radically reduces the cognitive and administrative burden on the exhausted paramedic and ensures the medical record is perfectly accurate for both clinical quality assurance and legal compliance.
But the hardware itself, the physical monitors, the heavy defibrillators actually running these AI algorithms, that is a massive global business. And we have an incredible 2026 market report from Mordor Intelligence breaking down the economics of the external defibrillator market.
And the financial numbers are staggering.
Let's hear them.
The global market size for these devices was valued at $4.03 billion in 2025, and it is estimated to reach $6.23 billion by 2031. It is expanding at a compound annual growth rate of 7.6%.
What is driving that massive financial growth? Is it the hospitals and the ambulance agencies buying the $25,000 manual monitors packed with the AI we just talked about?
The manual devices, the highly complex units used by professional clinicians, anchor the revenue. They hold over 45% of the total market share in terms of dollars spent.
Okay.
However, the volume growth, the actual sheer number of plastic units being manufactured and shipped, is being propelled by automated external defibrillators, or AEDs.
Oh, the ones in public spaces.
Yes. These are the simplified public access devices you see mounted in airports, shopping malls, and schools. That specific segment is expanding at an even faster rate of 9.54%.
And the report notes that growth is largely driven by legislation. State laws and public access mandates are legally forcing institutions to purchase them. The report highlights Maine's health club requirement and New Jersey's stringent school deployment laws.
But the report also exposes a massive systemic failure regarding these public AEDs.
Yeah, the TCO.
It all comes down to the total cost of ownership, or TCO. The economics of public access defibrillation are deeply flawed. A small community center or a local church might fundraise or scrape together $2,300 to purchase a single AED to mount on their wall.
Right, which seems like a one-time cost.
But they often fail to realize that the device requires ongoing maintenance. The lithium batteries and the specialized adhesive electrode pads expire every 2 to 5 years. Over a 7-year operational lifespan, the total cost of ownership easily pushes past $4,000.
And because schools and small businesses do not budget for that recurring maintenance cost, the devices simply sit in their glass cabinets and slowly die.
Exactly.
I want you, the listener, to stop and think about this reality right now. Picture the bright red AED mounted on the wall at your local gym or in the hallway of your child's elementary school. When was the last time a human being actually opened that cabinet and checked if the battery indicator was green?
The field audits from 2024 cited in the Mordor report are genuinely terrifying.
They are.
They physically inspected public devices and found that 18% of them had expired electrode pads and 12% had completely depleted batteries.
So they were useless.
More than 1 in 10 of the devices specifically designed and legally mandated to save your life in a public space are nothing more than dead plastic boxes hanging on a wall.
So how is the commercial market attempting to fix this systemic failure?
By fundamentally shifting their business model. The major manufacturers recognize that relying purely on hardware margins and manual maintenance is a failing strategy. So they are pivoting aggressively towards subscription analytics, cloud connectivity, and remote fleet monitoring. They are layering sophisticated software ecosystems over the physical hardware.
The report mentions the Stryker LifePak 35 as a prime example. It continuously connects to the cloud and actively alerts a centralized fleet manager on their laptop when a battery in a remote location is dropping below a certain voltage threshold or when pads are approaching their expiration date.
Exactly. The subscription models bundle the physical hardware, the recurring consumables, and the continuous cloud monitoring into a single, predictable operating expense rather than a massive, unexpected capital expenditure for a school.
The true commercial value capture for these companies is rapidly shifting from the physical delivery of an electric shock to the continuous data connectivity and the overarching software ecosystem.
Yes.
The market report also dives into the complex geopolitics of this industry, which I found fascinating because we rarely think about global trade when we look at an ambulance.
Yeah.
The supply chains for these life-saving devices are highly volatile right now.
We are witnessing a major geographic fracturing of the medical device market.
Tell me about China.
In China, Sweeping regulatory reforms implemented in late 2024 drastically cut the clinical review timelines for these devices down to a mere 30 days in specific pilot zones.
30 days is incredibly fast.
It is. This aggressively accelerated local manufacturing, iteration, and deployment. As a result, the Asia-Pacific region is now the fastest-growing market globally.
But meanwhile, in Europe, the regulatory environment is moving in the exact opposite direction. They implemented the International Procurement Instrument in 2025, which actively and intentionally restricted Chinese-manufactured medical devices from participating in large, government-funded public tenders.
Right.
This geopolitical move is forcing European hospitals and EMS agencies to suddenly shift their massive orders to regional manufacturers. This abrupt shift is scrambling the entire global supply chain, particularly for the advanced semiconductor components required to run the AI algorithms we've discussed.
It perfectly illustrates how intrinsically linked global trade policies and international tariffs are to the physical availability of a life-saving AI monitor in your local neighborhood ambulance.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and look back at the immense journey we have just been on.
It's been a lot.
We started with an invisible artificial intelligence, quietly listening to the chaotic ambient noise of a panicked 911 phone call, identifying the subtle acoustic gasp of a cardiac arrest 10 seconds faster than a highly trained human.
We watched complex spatiotemporal machine learning algorithms ingest live weather patterns and traffic data to predict exactly where emergencies would happen, dynamically moving ambulances around a city like a digital twin surge pricing model.
We saw augmented reality headsets projecting holograms to mechanically guide the physical depth of a paramedic's compressions on a pediatric patient.
We watched neural networks draw targeting boxes over vocal cords to allow a miniature motorized joystick to flawlessly thread a breathing tube.
We explored how FDA-cleared AI algorithms can evaluate 10 seconds of simple electrical heart data and accurately diagnose hidden, silent structural heart failure that traditional parameters in human eyes completely miss.
And we unpacked the multi-billion-dollar geopolitically fractured commercial market that is attempting to fund, connect, and maintain this entire sprawling digital ecosystem.
It is a profound systemic transformation of what it means to practice emergency medicine and the chaotic environment of the field.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean? When the dust settles on this technological revolution and all of these algorithms, augmented realities, and motorized tools are standard issue in the back of every single ambulance, where does that leave the human being wearing the uniform?
I think it leaves the medical community with a profound, almost existential paradox to ponder.
How so?
For the last 50 years, the evolution of a paramedic has been defined by the pursuit of learning more. They were tasked with absorbing more complex pathophysiology, memorizing more intricate pharmacology, and mastering increasingly difficult manual skills.
Right.
But as artificial intelligence rapidly assumes more and more responsibility for high-level diagnostics, complex risk stratification, and even the physical mechanical execution of procedures via motorized tools, we have to ask a difficult question. What is the true future role of the pre-hospital clinician?
Right. If the machine is reliably diagnosing the obscure heart attack, if the algorithm is predicting the trauma deterioration severity, and a motor is physically driving the breathing tube into the airway, what is the human doing?
Exactly. Will future paramedics need to understand more high-level medical theory to critically interpret, challenge, and contextualize what the AI is telling them? Will they need deeper knowledge to understand why the Anumana algorithm is struggling with an underweight patient? Or will they need to understand less theory, essentially becoming the highly empathetic, physically robust mechanical hands of an overarching omniscient digital intelligence? Are we actively training future diagnosticians who leverage AI as a tool, or are we unintentionally training biological avatars to act on behalf of a medical supercomputer?
It is a fundamental philosophical shift in the very definition of a healthcare provider. And the most startling part is that this shift isn't happening in some distant, imagined sci-fi future. It is happening right now at 70 miles an hour in the back of an ambulance near you.